I used to think people exaggerated the dangers of buying stuff from strangers online. Back then, I was 26, living alone in a basement apartment in Kingston, Ontario, trying to save money anywhere I could. My job at a small insurance office barely covered rent, groceries, and the payments on my old Dodge Caravan that sounded like it was coughing every time I started it in winter. So whenever I needed furniture or electronics, I checked Ontario Craigslist first. Most of the time, it was harmless. A used coffee table from an old couple in Belleville. A microwave from a college student moving out. Nothing weird ever happened, which is probably why I ignored the feeling in my stomach the night I found the couch listing. It was posted around 11:40 p.m. Dark gray sectional, excellent condition. Need gone ASAP, $20. The pictures looked almost professional. Clean apartment, bright lighting. The couch looked brand new, the same kind I'd seen at Leon's for over $1,000. I remember actually laughing to myself. There's no way this thing is real. But I still clicked the ad. The seller's name was listed as Martin. No phone number, just email. The description was short. Moving out of province. Need gone tomorrow. That should have been my first warning. I emailed him anyway. Hi, is the couch still available? 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Yes, if serious, make offer. I stared at the screen for a second before typing. Would you take $80? Again, almost immediately, deal. Send address. I can bring tonight. That response made me pause. Who delivers a couch at midnight for $80? I typed back carefully. I'd rather pick it up myself tomorrow. A full minute passed. Then, no problem, but easier if I come to you. Send address. Something about the wording bothered me. It felt pushy. Like he wasn't really focused on selling the couch. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, another email came through. You there? Then another. I can leave now. I remember sitting there in silence in my apartment, my laptop glowing in the dark living room while the snow tapped softly against the basement window. My friend Chloe was texting me at the same time about some concert downtown, so I sent her screenshots of the emails. She replied instantly. Girl. No, I laughed. You think he's a serial killer over a couch? I think normal people sleep at midnight. Fair point. I decided not to respond anymore. The next morning, though, I woke up to another email. This time it was different. Sorry if I seemed rude. Here's my address if you still want it. Underneath was an address in Napanee, about 35 minutes from me. I checked the listing again. Still active. Still only $120. And honestly, I needed a couch badly. Mine had springs sticking out of it. Every time friends came over, I threw blankets across the cushions to hide the damage. So against my better judgment, I grabbed coffee, put on my winter coat, and drove out there Saturday afternoon. The entire drive, I kept telling myself I was overthinking things. The neighborhood looked normal enough when I arrived. Small detached homes. Snow piled along the sidewalks. Kids' hockey nets sitting in frozen driveways. But the seller's house stood out immediately. It was smaller than the others around it. Older, too. The siding looked stained from years of weather damage. One upstairs window was covered with a blanket instead of curtains. I sat in my van for a second with the engine running. I almost left right there. Instead, I texted Chloe the address just in case, mostly joking. Then I walked up and rang the bell. The door opened almost instantly. The man standing there looked older than I expected. Maybe late 40s, heavyset. Blue baseball cap pulled low over his forehead, but the thing I noticed most was his smile. Not friendly, too wide. Like he'd been waiting at the door before I even rang. You made it, he said. His voice sounded oddly excited. Yeah. I came to see the couch. Come in. The house smelled stale, like cigarette smoke covered up with strong air freshener. I stepped inside carefully. The living room was dim except for sunlight coming through the blinds. And then I saw the couch. Immediately my stomach dropped. The photos online had been completely misleading. The couch was filthy. There were scratches all along the armrest, tears in the fabric, dark stains on one cushion. It looked like something dragged out to the curb. I stopped walking. This isn't the same condition as the photos. He shrugged casually. Pictures make things look nicer. I gave an uncomfortable laugh. I think I'm gonna pass. His smile stayed frozen on his face. Price negotiable. No, sorry, I'm good. I started heading toward the front door. That's when the atmosphere changed. He stepped in front of me slightly, not enough to fully block me, but enough to make me stop. You drove all the way here, he said. Take it for free. I frowned. What? For free? He smiled wider. If you give me something. Every nerve in my body tightened. What does that mean? His eyes moved slowly up and down my body. You know, I felt sick instantly. I moved sideways around him. No thanks. He reached out suddenly and grabbed my shoulder. Not hard, but enough. Don't be rude, he said quietly. That was the moment real fear hit me. I shoved his hand off and practically rushed outside. Behind me, he called out calmly, "You forgot to say thank you." I didn't answer. I jumped into my van, locked the doors immediately, and backed out so fast I nearly hit the mailbox. The whole drive home, I kept checking my mirrors. No one followed me. By the time I got back to Kingston, I'd convinced myself the worst part was over. Just another creepy guy, nothing more. That night around 11 p.m., I was lying in bed watching reruns of some cooking show, trying not to think about it anymore. Outside, freezing rain tapped against the basement windows. Then I heard footsteps above me, slow, heavy. At first I assumed it was my landlord upstairs. But then I heard the sound again, closer this time. On my porch steps, I muted the TV. Silence. Then, rattle. The doorknob moved violently. I froze. Every hair on my arm stood up instantly. Someone was trying my front door. Very slowly, I got out of bed and walked toward the entrance. Another shake of the knob. Then silence again. I pressed my eye against the peephole. Nothing. The porch was empty. But before I could relax, I heard another sound. The backyard gate creaking open. My heart started hammering so hard it hurt. I grabbed my phone immediately and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered while I backed away from the door. "There's someone outside my apartment," I whispered. As I explained what was happening, I heard footsteps moving along the side of the house, toward the back entrance. Then the back doorknob started turning, slowly, carefully, like whoever it was didn't want to make noise. I felt completely frozen. The dispatcher kept asking questions, but I barely remember answering. Then suddenly the person started pushing harder against the door. The handle jerked violently. I finally screamed, "The police are coming!" Instant silence. A few seconds later, I heard the backyard gate slam shut. Then nothing. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers searched the property with flashlights while I stood shaking in my kitchen wrapped in a blanket, but they found nobody. No footprints either. The freezing rain had washed everything away. One officer asked if I knew anyone who might want to scare me. I immediately told them about the Craigslist seller. I showed them the emails. The officer's expression changed slightly when he read them. "Did you give him your address?" "No." "Did he see your license plate?" The question made my stomach drop because, yes. "Of course he had." The officer nodded slowly. "It's possible he followed you." I barely slept for weeks after that. Every noise outside made me jump awake. Every car slowing near the house made my chest tighten. And the worst part? 3 days later, I checked Craigslist again. The couch listing was gone. But the account was still active, and there was a brand new listing posted under the same name. Free dining table, need gone ASAP. Different furniture. Different photos. Same writing style. Same pressure tactics. I reported the account immediately. Nothing happened. A month later, I moved out of that basement apartment entirely. Even now, years later, I still think about that night whenever I hear footsteps outside after dark. Maybe it really was him. Maybe he followed me from Napanee all the way home and waited until midnight to see if I lived alone. Or maybe it was someone else entirely. But deep down, I already know the truth. Because right before I slammed my van door outside his house, I remember glancing up once and seeing him standing on his porch smiling at me, not angry, not embarrassed, just smiling like he already knew where I was going next. Never meet a stranger from an online listing alone. Always bring a trusted friend or family member with you and share the exact address with someone before you go. If a deal feels too good to be true, especially with late-night pressure tactics like, "I can come to you now," trust your gut and walk away immediately. Always park facing the exit so you can leave quickly, and never let a stranger see your license plate if you feel uneasy. If someone blocks your path or makes an inappropriate demand, move assertively, make noise, and get out. Your safety matters more than being polite. After any threatening encounter, report it to both the police and the platform right away, because your report could protect the next person. What the audience learns. This story teaches that danger rarely announces itself loudly. It hides behind a cheap price and a casual email. The real lesson is that your instincts are a survival tool. Every warning sign was there: the late-night posting, the pushy responses, the mismatched photos. She ignored them all because she wanted to believe the best. Online marketplaces are useful but unregulated, and predators actively use them to locate vulnerable people, especially those living alone. Personal suggestion: please never underestimate a bad feeling. Your body recognizes danger before your mind agrees to accept it. This young woman survived because she moved fast when it mattered, but the risk never had to be that close. Before any marketplace meetup, use the buddy system without exception. Meet in public, bring someone, share your location live on WhatsApp or Google Maps, and have a check-in call scheduled. No couch, no deal, no saving is worth your life. Stay smart, stay safe. I'd been sharing a basement apartment in Ontario with my cousin Derek for almost a year when my old Honda finally gave up on me. Not in some dramatic movie way either. No smoke, no explosion. Nothing exciting. It just refused to start one freezing Thursday morning while I was already late for work. I remember sitting there in the parking lot with my hands gripping the steering wheel while the engine clicked uselessly. Come on, don't do this today," I muttered. The dashboard lights flickered once and died. That car had over 320,000 kilometers on it. I'd bought it cheap after high school, and honestly, it surviving as long as it did was impressive. But now I was stuck relying on buses in the middle of February, and if you've ever lived in Ontario during winter, you know how miserable that gets. I worked evenings at a warehouse outside Hamilton, which meant buses were inconsistent after midnight. Some nights Derek had to pick me up because I'd be stranded downtown in freezing wind, waiting 40 minutes for a transfer that never came. After 2 weeks of that, I was desperate. I didn't have enough money for a dealership. Facebook Marketplace was full of rebuilt junk and obvious scams. Craigslist was still the one place where, every once in a while, you could find an older person selling a reliable car cheap because they just wanted it gone. At least that's what everyone said. So every night after work, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop scrolling listings for hours. Most were garbage. Needs minor work usually meant the transmission was dying. Runs great meant the check engine light had been reset 5 minutes before the photos. Then one Tuesday night around 1:00 a.m., I found a listing that instantly grabbed me. 2004 Toyota Avalon, 89,000 kilometers. One owner, no accidents. Clean title, $40,000. The photos look normal too, not dealership photos. Just pictures taken in a snowy driveway. The car looked clean. No rust visible around the wheel wells either, which in Ontario was rare. The seller's name was listed as Martin. The ad said, "Selling because I no longer drive after surgery. Car has been sitting for months." Starts perfectly. Serious buyers only. I stared at the listing for a long time. It almost looked too good. I called the number expecting no answer because it was after 1:00 a.m., but surprisingly, someone picked up on the third ring. "Hello?" The voice sounded older, calm, maybe late 50s. Hi. I'm calling about the Toyota?" "Oh yes," the man said immediately. "Still available." His voice was strangely soft. Friendly even. I asked him basic questions about the car. "Any rust? No major rust. Issues?" "None that I know of." "Safety inspection? It passed last year before I stopped driving." He answered everything without hesitation. Then he said something weird. "You sound young." I laughed awkwardly. "I'm 24. "That's good," he said quietly. "Young people appreciate dependable things." I didn't really know what to say to that. He gave me an address outside a small rural area near Brantford and asked if I could come the next afternoon. "Sure," I said. "Around 4? "That works." Then before hanging up, he added, "Bring cash if you're serious. I don't hold vehicles." Fair enough. The next day at work, I kept thinking about the car. Honestly, it felt like my luck might finally be changing. Derek thought the price sounded suspicious, though. "Dude," he said while microwaving leftovers, "nobody sells a low-kilometer Toyota that cheap unless something's wrong with it. Maybe he's old. Or maybe you're getting murdered." I laughed. "Relax, I'll text you the address." "Do that," he said. "And if I don't hear from you by 6, I'm calling cops." I rolled my eyes, but before leaving, I actually did send him the address, just in case. The drive out there took almost 40 minutes. The farther I got from the city, the emptier the roads became. Snowbanks lined both sides of the highway, and eventually GPS took me down narrower roads surrounded by woods and frozen fields. The sun was already lowering when I turned onto Old Creek Road. That's when my stomach tightened a little. The road looked almost abandoned. Most houses sat far back from the street, hidden behind trees. Then GPS said, "You have arrived." The property looked wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just neglected. The driveway was mostly mud and ice. A small bungalow sat near the back of the property with faded yellow siding. One window near the front was covered entirely with plywood. There were piles of scrap metal beside an open detached garage. I slowed my car but didn't pull in immediately. Something felt off already. No Toyota. I checked the address again. Same number. I parked anyway. Maybe it was inside the garage. As soon as I stepped out, the cold hit hard enough to make my eyes water. The wind carried that sharp rural smell of wet wood and dirt. I walked toward the garage first. There were shelves covered in random car parts, old headlights, tires, rusty tools, a transmission sitting on the floor, but no Avalon. No car at all. "Hello?" I called. Nothing. I checked my phone. 4:07 p.m. Maybe he was inside. I walked to the front porch and knocked. No answer. I waited. Knocked again. Still nothing. Then I noticed something strange. The front door wasn't fully shut, not wide open, just slightly cracked. I stood there staring at it. "Martin?" Silence. I should have left right then. Seriously, every instinct told me to get back in my car. But I'd already driven 40 minutes, and part of me thought maybe the old guy just had trouble moving around. So I pushed the door open slightly. "Hello?" The smell hit me first. Not rotten. Not exactly. More like mildew mixed with something chemical. The inside of the house was dark except for faint daylight coming through curtains. "Martin?" Then I heard it. A phone vibrating somewhere inside. Buzz. 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 I realized it was coming from deeper in the house. I pulled my own phone out and called the number from the ad. Instantly, the vibrating became louder. Inside the house. A chill went straight down my spine. Why wasn't he answering? I hung up. The vibrating stopped. For a few seconds, the entire house went silent again. Then somewhere farther back, a floor creaked. Not loudly, just enough. My chest tightened. "Hello?" No response. I took one step farther inside and immediately regretted it. The house looked frozen in time. Old furniture, dust everywhere. Stacks of newspapers, and against one wall, mannequins. At least I thought they were mannequins. 3 of them, dressed in old clothes, standing around a dining table. One wore a winter coat and scarf. Another had sunglasses on indoors. I actually laughed nervously because it was so bizarre. What the hell? Then I noticed something that made my blood go cold. The one nearest the hallway had real human hair. Not mannequin hair. Real hair. Uneven. Dirty. I backed up slowly. My brain kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe they were medical dummies. Maybe antique figures. Maybe. A loud thud came from upstairs. I froze. Another creak followed. Someone was moving up there, and suddenly every part of me understood something terrible. The listing, the empty property, the weird mannequins, the unanswered phone. I wasn't there to buy a car. I turned and walked quickly toward the door, trying not to panic. Then behind me, I heard a voice. "Leaving already?" I spun around so fast I almost slipped. A man stood at the end of the hallway, tall, thin, gray beard. He looked older than I expected, maybe mid-60s, but what terrified me was how quietly he'd appeared. I never heard him approach. His expression looked calm, almost disappointed. "You came early," he said softly. I forced a nervous smile. Yeah. I think I got the wrong address, actually." He tilted his head slightly. "No, you didn't." My heart was hammering now. "I should go. You didn't even see the car." His voice remained weirdly gentle. "There's no car here," I said. For the first time, his expression changed slightly. Not anger, more annoyance. Young people are always impatient. I backed toward the door. Then I noticed something near the hallway behind him. A camera tripod. And beside it, rolls of duct tape. That was enough. I turned and rushed outside. Behind me, the man suddenly shouted, "Wait!" Not angry anymore. Desperate, I sprinted toward my car, slipping on snow. I heard the front door slam open behind me. My hand shook so badly I dropped my keys before finally unlocking the car. As soon as the engine started, I looked toward the house. The man was standing on the porch, watching me, completely still. Then slowly, he smiled. Not a normal smile either. It looked forced, too wide. I threw the car into reverse so hard the tires spun in mud before catching traction. I sped down the driveway without looking back. For the first 5 minutes driving away, I genuinely thought he might follow me. I kept checking mirrors, expecting headlights. Nothing, just empty snowy roads. When I finally got back near the highway, I pulled into a gas station because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Derek answered on the first ring. "Yo, how's the car?" There was no car. "What?" I told him everything. Silence. Then, "Dude, call the police." And I did. An officer met me later that evening and took the information seriously at first, especially when I explained the fake listing and strange house. But when they checked the property the next day, nobody answered. The Craigslist post was gone. The number had been disconnected, and according to the officer who called me back, the house technically belonged to an elderly man who died almost 8 months earlier. "What about somebody living there now?" I asked. "We didn't find anyone." I remember sitting there in silence after the call ended, because I knew what I saw. Someone had been inside that house, watching me, waiting. For weeks afterward, I kept replaying everything in my head. The mannequins, the camera tripod, the duct tape, that smile. But the thing that bothered me most was realizing how perfectly normal it all started. A cheap car listing, a polite phone call, a quiet older man. Nothing about it screamed danger. And honestly, if I hadn't trusted my instincts when things started feeling wrong, I don't think I would have made it back home. I stopped using Craigslist after that. Completely. A month later, I bought a rusty Mazda from a mechanic in Hamilton for almost double the price. Worst financial decision I ever made. But every time that car started in the morning, I felt relieved to still be alive to drive it. The most dangerous traps in life rarely look like traps at all. This story teaches that predators study human desperation. They know that a person who needs a car badly enough will overlook red flags that a calm, comfortable person would never ignore. When a listing combines an unusually low price, a remote location, a late-night phone call, and vague details, that combination itself is the warning. No single red flag seems fatal alone, but together they form a pattern that your gut recognizes before your brain does. Always research a seller's address on Google Maps before driving anywhere unfamiliar. A quick satellite view would have shown that abandoned rural property immediately and saved this entire ordeal. What the audience learns. This story goes deeper than basic online safety. It reveals how isolation is weaponized. The seller did not choose a busy neighborhood or a public parking lot. He chose a road that GPS barely knew, surrounded by woods, at a time when daylight was already fading. That choice was deliberate. The audience learns that location is not a small detail in a private sale, it is everything. A legitimate seller never has a reason to meet you somewhere remote and inconvenient. If someone insists on a location that feels wrong, that insistence itself is your answer. Walk away before you even start the engine. Personal suggestion. Here is something nobody talks about enough. Desperation makes us negotiate with our own instincts. This young man knew something felt off the moment he saw that driveway. He even laughed nervously at the mannequins, which is what our mind does when it is trying to process something terrifying without fully panicking. That nervous laugh was not amusement, it was his body buying time. Learn to recognize that feeling in yourself. The moment something makes you laugh nervously when nothing is actually funny, stop moving forward. Send your location to someone you trust before every single meetup, not as a joke, not as a formality, as a genuine safety plan. Your life is always worth more than the deal you are chasing. I had been saving for almost a year to buy my first iPhone. Back then, I was working evenings at a small grocery store in Oshawa, Ontario, making barely enough money to help my mom with rent and still keep something for myself. Most of my friends already had newer phones, but I was still carrying around an old Samsung with a cracked screen that randomly shut off whenever the battery dropped below 30%. I didn't care much about expensive stuff, but after my old phone died during an emergency one winter night, I finally decided I needed something reliable. An iPhone 5 was still considered decent at the time, and Craigslist Ontario was full of listings. Most were overpriced, scratched up, or obviously stolen. Then, one Thursday night, I found a post that immediately stood out. iPhone 5. Excellent condition, 220 firm. The pictures looked real. No blurry images, no fake stock photos. Just a clean black iPhone sitting on a kitchen counter. The seller's name was Ryan. His description was short. Need quick sale. Upgrading soon. Works perfectly. I texted him. He answered within 2 minutes. That should have been my first warning sign. We agreed to meet in the parking lot of a Tim Hortons near Whitby around 9:45 p.m. He said he was coming from Toronto and didn't want to drive farther east. I asked my younger cousin Marcus to come with me because he knew more about phones than I did. He was 19, loud, sarcastic, and way more street smart than me. When I told him where we were meeting, he frowned. At night? It's a public place. Yeah, he muttered. Public places get empty too. Still, he came with me. The entire drive there, snow flurries drifted across the windshield while the radio played quietly in the background. Ontario winters had this weird feeling at night. The roads always looked emptier than they actually were. You got the cash? Marcus asked. I patted my jacket pocket. $220. You sure this isn't stolen? I checked the serial online. That doesn't mean anything. I laughed nervously. You think everybody on Craigslist is a criminal? No, he said while staring out the window. Just most people selling iPhones at night. When we pulled into the Tim Hortons parking lot, the place was almost dead except for a pickup truck near the drive-thru and a black Acura parked along the far side of the lot. Its headlights were off. Marcus noticed it immediately. That them? Probably. A second later, the driver door opened. 2 men stepped out. Both were bigger than us. The taller guy wore a dark winter jacket and a gray beanie pulled low over his eyes. The other had a thick beard and heavy work boots that scraped against the pavement as they walked toward us. Marcus quietly said, "Why'd he bring another guy?" I didn't answer. The tall guy smiled as he approached my window. "You, Tyler?" "Yeah." He held up the phone. "Here it is, man." I got out of the car while Marcus stayed beside me. The phone honestly looked perfect. No scratches. No cracks. Nothing. Mind if he checks it? I asked. The guy shrugged. Go ahead. Marcus popped my SIM card inside and started testing everything while the 2 men stood there watching silently. The cold wind moved through the parking lot while the Tim Hortons sign buzzed overhead. Marcus checked the speakers, camera, Wi-Fi, buttons. Everything worked. It's legit, he finally said. I felt relieved immediately. The tall guy nodded toward me. So you got the 220? I reached into my pocket. Then his friend suddenly spoke for the first time. Actually, make it 270. I blinked. What? 270, the bearded guy repeated. That's what we want now. That's not what the ad said. The tall guy shrugged casually. A lot of people messaged me after you. Someone offered more. Marcus stepped closer beside me. Then sell it to them. For a second, neither man spoke. The tension changed instantly. The tall guy stared at me carefully, almost studying me. Then he smirked slightly. You drove all the way here, though. I hated the feeling in my stomach right then. Like I was suddenly trapped in something uncomfortable. I pulled out the original amount. 220's all I brought. That was a lie. I had another 50 hidden in my wallet. The bearded guy looked annoyed, but after a few seconds, the tall one grabbed the cash. Fine. He handed me the phone. The two men walked back toward their Acura without another word. Marcus watched them carefully. That was weird. Yeah, let's go. But instead of leaving immediately, I sat in the car testing the phone again because I was paranoid something would stop working after they left. I called my friend Noah. The phone sounded crystal clear. I opened apps, tried the camera again. Everything seemed perfect. Marcus suddenly glanced into the mirror. They're still there. I looked up. The Acura hadn't moved. Both headlights were still off. The engine was running. Maybe they're waiting for somebody. Marcus didn't look convinced. Start driving, so I did. As we pulled out onto the road, the Acura pulled out too. At first, I ignored it. There were plenty of cars around. But after 3 turns, Marcus looked over at me. They're following us. No, they're not. Dude, I checked the mirror again. The Acura stayed directly behind us. Every turn, every lane change. Same distance, same headlights. A knot formed in my chest. Maybe they live this way. Marcus shook his head slowly. No chance. I drove faster. The Acura stayed behind us. We hit a red light near an intersection outside Ajax. The Acura stopped 2 cars behind. Marcus kept staring at them. I don't like this. Neither did I. The light turned green. I drove again. So did they. That's when the panic finally started creeping in. Not fast panic, slow panic. The kind that builds quietly in your chest until every little thing feels wrong. Call somebody, Marcus said. Who? I don't know. Anybody. I called Noah again and explained quickly what was happening. He immediately said, don't go home. That hit me hard, because until then, I hadn't even realized that's exactly where I'd been heading. I turned onto another road. The Acura stayed behind us. Now it was obvious. Marcus rolled his window slightly and looked back. They're close. Don't look at them. You think they want the phone back? I don't know. Or the money. The road ahead was nearly empty. Snow drifted across the pavement under orange streetlights. I could feel my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Then suddenly, the Acura sped up. Fast. Its headlights filled my mirrors. Marcus cursed loudly. Go, go, go. I pressed harder on the gas. The Acura stayed inches behind us. It felt deliberate now, like they wanted us scared, and it worked. I blew through a yellow light. They followed. Marcus grabbed the dashboard. Bro, slow down. I'm trying to lose them. You're gonna kill us. The Acura suddenly swerved into the other lane beside us. For half a second, I could see the bearded passenger staring directly at us through his window. No expression. Just staring. Then they dropped back again. I felt sick. Police station, Marcus said suddenly. What? Drive to a police station. I had no idea where the nearest one was. My brain wasn't working properly anymore. Every turn I made, they made too. At one intersection, the light turned red just as we approached. Cars began moving through from both directions. I made the dumbest decision of my life. I floored it. Marcus screamed at me as we shot through the intersection barely ahead of cross traffic. Horn blasts exploded around us. My heart nearly stopped. But when I looked back, the Acura hadn't followed. They were trapped at the red light. Oh my God, Marcus breathed. I kept driving for another 15 minutes before finally calming down. We circled random neighborhoods just to be safe. Eventually, Marcus laughed nervously. Craigslist deal of the year. I forced a weak smile, but deep down, something still felt wrong. When we finally got home, my parents were already asleep. Marcus stayed over because neither of us felt like driving anymore. I remember sitting on my bed around midnight, setting up the iPhone while the house stayed completely silent. That's when I heard it. Car doors shutting outside, 2 of them. My stomach instantly dropped. I moved carefully toward the window and froze. Across the street sat the black Acura. Headlights off, engine running. I couldn't breathe for a second. Marcus came into my room after seeing my face. "What?" I pointed outside. The color drained from his face immediately. No way. Both front doors opened. The 2 men stepped out. My entire body went cold. "How did they find us?" Marcus whispered. Then I remembered the registration papers in my old car. My address. They must have seen it when we met. I ran downstairs so fast I nearly slipped. My dad woke up confused as I shook him awake. "What's wrong?" The guys from the phone sale followed us home. His expression changed instantly. "What? They're outside." My dad grabbed the aluminum baseball bat he kept near the laundry room. Marcus locked the back door. Then came the first knock. Slow, heavy. Boom, boom, boom. Nobody moved. Another knock came louder this time. Then a voice. "Open up." My dad stood near the front entrance, gripping the bat tightly. "Get off my property," he shouted. Silence followed. Then the taller man spoke through the door calmly. "You got something that belongs to us." My heart pounded so hard I thought they could hear it. My dad yelled back, "I'm calling the police." The bearded guy laughed. "No, you're not." Then came a metallic sound, a gun being cocked. Marcus whispered, "Oh my God." The tall man spoke again. "Open the door before somebody gets hurt." I remember my mother crying quietly upstairs. Everything felt unreal, like some nightmare that had walked directly into our house. My dad looked at me sharply. "Call Eric." Eric was our neighbor 3 houses down. Retired RCMP officer. I grabbed the house phone with shaking hands and dialed. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Outside, another bang hit the door. Harder. Then suddenly, POP. A muffled gunshot, not loud like movies. Smaller, scarier. Wood splintered beside the door frame, inches from where my dad had been standing. My mother screamed upstairs. Marcus pulled me backward. My dad finally shouted, "Everybody get down!" Another voice outside yelled suddenly. "Police, drop the weapon." Blue lights exploded through the front windows. I almost collapsed from relief. Eric's cruiser sat crooked across the street. The 2 men tried running toward their Acura, but another patrol car flew around the corner, blocking them in. Apparently, Eric had seen the Acura parked suspiciously earlier while returning home and stayed nearby after hearing yelling. Within seconds, officers tackled both men onto the snow-covered street. I remember standing in the doorway afterwards, shaking uncontrollably while snow drifted down under the flashing lights. One officer picked up a handgun near the curb. Another searched their car. Inside, they found duct tape, gloves, and a crowbar. That part haunted me most, because it meant they came prepared for something far worse than robbery. A detective later told us both men already had criminal records for armed home invasions around Ontario. The iPhone sale had probably been bait from the beginning. Maybe they followed buyers home regularly. Maybe they waited until people were asleep. Maybe we weren't the first. For weeks afterward, I barely slept. Every engine outside made my chest tighten. Every knock at the door made me freeze. Even now, years later, I still get uncomfortable meeting strangers for online sales. People always joke about Craigslist horror stories until something happens to them personally. Then suddenly, every small decision replays in your head over and over. Meeting at night, showing cash, driving home, ignoring red flags, trusting strangers because they smiled. The craziest part is that the phone actually worked perfectly. Police returned it to me a month later after the investigation ended. I never used it again. I sold it the same week. This story exposes a criminal strategy that most people have never heard of, using a legitimate sale as a scouting mission. The phone worked perfectly, the price was real, the handover was smooth, and yet the entire transaction was potentially a trap designed to identify targets, confirm they carry cash, and track them home. The education here is not just about staying safe during a sale. It is about understanding what happens after the sale ends. Always take a long, indirect route home after any cash transaction with strangers. Circle neighborhoods, stop at a busy gas station, and only return home when you are absolutely certain no vehicle has stayed behind you through multiple turns. What the audience learns most online safety advice stops at meet in a public place. But this story proves that public places are only the beginning of the danger, not the end of it. The audience learns that your car registration is essentially your home address sitting in plain sight, and strangers you meet for sales can read it the moment you are distracted testing a phone. Never leave registration documents visible inside your vehicle during a meetup. Beyond that, this story teaches that a sudden price change at the last moment is not just a negotiation tactic, it is a pressure test. Criminals use it deliberately to study how you react under stress, whether you carry extra cash, and how easily you can be controlled. Staying firm on price is not stubbornness, it is self-protection. Personal suggestion. What shook me most about this story is the items found inside their car. Duct tape, gloves, a crowbar. They did not follow that family home because of anger or impulse. They came with a plan. That level of preparation means this was not their first time, and the phone sale was never really about money. It was about finding the right victim. So here's what I want you to carry with you. The transaction ending does not mean the danger has ended. Watch your mirrors for at least 10 to 15 minutes after every private sale. If the same vehicle stays with you through 3 or more turns, do not go home. Drive directly to a police station, a fire hall, or any place with uniformed people and bright lights. Your address is the most valuable thing a criminal can take from an encounter. Protect it like your life depends on it, because sometimes it genuinely does.